Now, before we go into the last panel of the day, we have a video for you to watch.
If we look at the last IPCC reports, of course, we can see that Arctic and subarctic regions are warming faster than the global average.
So climate is already changing rapidly. We have seen large temperature changes just over the last century and the last decades.
I think we will see more and more extreme events, and unfortunately, this extreme event will become more and more intense.
Ecosystems are disturbed and perturbed. And also on land, there are impacts on forests, but not just on the natural forest, but also on forestry and agriculture, of course.
We won't face only one event, but we will see multi-hazard events, or for example, cascading or triggering events where you have, for example, heat stress, drought that are triggering wildfires or forest fires. And that's something that unfortunately we will see more and more in the Nordic regions. Rural and urban areas will be affected by climate change. But of course, they are affected differently, just because they are not organized the same way, just because also they are not related to the same sectors. So, for example, about the organization, you have many more people living in cities, so more people will be affected. But it doesn't mean that the rural areas are not affected by a heat wave. If you think about ecosystem, nature, the forest, agriculture, there are many things that will be affected also in the rural areas.
And we already today see a lot of problems related to flooding. We have had in the last few weeks now immense floodings in parts of Sweden and Norway with a lot of impacts on both roads and houses and villages.
Bridges are also destroyed, so then you can't transport people, but you also can't transport goods. So it's affecting many services, the food sector, many parts of societies are paralyzed. Climate risk is not only about hazard, it's also about exposure and vulnerability. So the region or the part of the world or of Europe or the Nordic region that will be the most affected are actually the ones that maybe have not adapted fast enough. So it's important to remember that we need to adapt.
We need to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions especially. And we have great potential for more renewable energy. We already today have a lot of hydropower, and wind power is growing very strongly.
You really need to have a strong and a collaborative discussion between energy, forestry, agriculture, transportation. Everyone needs to think about how land, for example, will be used in the future.
We are talking a lot on the European level, not least about carbon dioxide reduction, and this is also an area where the Scandinavian countries and the Nordic countries can be of importance as well.
The green transition needs really to be done in collaboration between sectors and also, of course, between sectors and society and government. Everyone needs to be involved.
Yes. All right, so time for the last panel of today, where we are trying to conclude the discussion on the green transition. Let's just start with welcoming in the panelists and taking a seat, if they are somewhere to be found. Yes. As you can see, some of the panelists are renewable, so we're having them sit with us again, but also having new ones, Torun Kornstad from Norway, and we are still with Hans Peter Karlsson from Sweden, Bára Örk from Iceland, Mats from Norway, and also new is Helena from Sweden. We've been talking in this later session about the green transition, but we keep discussing, of course, more generally the part of youth within this context, that youth isn't having a great enough participation in certain decisions and such. If we could start with you, Helena, like you have a program which is Youth 2030, a deliberate youth program trying to make young people more empowered in a wide sense. Tell us what you've been doing. It's a rural project in the north of Sweden. Tell us about it.
Yes. So I come from Youth 2030 movement, and we are a Swedish NGO where we strive to break down barriers between young people and power. So I've been the project manager for our 3-year project, Youth Up North, which has been in 3 northern municipalities in rural areas in Sweden. So we've been working there for 3 years on how to make democracy bigger and broader.
In what sense? What is something you feel needs to be done that isn't done?
Well, first of all, we do believe that we have to engage the whole community. Today we've been talking about youth councils as a really great tool, and I agree it's a great tool, but we need to bring everyone together. We see that in Sweden it's less than 2 out of 10 young people that believes that they can influence local decision makers. Less than 2 out of 10. So those numbers to me are very upsetting. And another recent research showed that 85% of youth and children feels that adults rarely or never listen to them. So if we have only youth councils, then a few privileged people get to the real power, so to say. So what we've been trying to do is to collect everyone within the municipality together with decision makers and to co-create solutions on challenges that youth themselves has identified. And we never, or let me rephrase that, we always bring the decision makers to where the youth are.
These are not very promising statistics about the listening of Swedish adults. Do they listen to the youth? You are yourself a Swedish decision maker, or have been. Do you think this is a real issue?
Do they listen to the young people? No. As I said before on the panel, I don't think so, not enough anyway. But they don't listen to anybody else either. So I think that might be the problem. 50 years ago, 19% of Swedish citizens were member in a political party. Now it's 2%. Part of that 19 was collectively, membership through the work unions. But nevertheless, it's a huge drop. And participation in the democracy on an average is extremely low. We see that the system of a parliament with parties in it doesn't really work anymore, and especially not for the young people, because at least the young people I meet, and I really try to, they say, well, I'm not interested in educational policies or whatever. I'm interested in this question. I want to work with only this. I'm an activist in climate or in animals' rights or whatever. And we're not catering for those needs in the system. So I would say, no, we're not listening good enough.
Yeah, Mats, you really believe in youth councils, but he sounds like youth councils, and she also said that youth councils maybe cater to a quite narrow group, maybe, and don't really represent a really democratic development. What is your experience? Do you think youth councils are the way forward, or is democracy as we know it, does it have to take some changes?
I think youth councils have a lot of responsibility to actually create this engagement from youth. Like, that's one of the main responsibilities that the youth councils have, because if you have a well-functioning youth council, then you can then you automatically engage more youth into knowing that, oh, youth actually have a voice in politics. Okay, then maybe that kind of spurs some discussions, and then maybe you know someone who's in the youth council, then you can talk to them, and the same with the student councils as well. If you have, as I said earlier, if you have tangible power as a youth council or a student council or whatever, then that gives these, then youth know that they actually have power, and that creates more engagement, and that positive feedback loop I talked about earlier. But I completely agree that all youth should be involved, and there are many examples of youth participation. For example, you can go to a kindergarten and ask them to make the signs of their dream neighborhood, and that's one way of creating youth involvement. And I think that policymakers should be good at doing that, as you said, like meeting young people where they are, and or having like workshops with different classes, making mood boards and so on. So I think more policymakers should be actively trying to involve youth, and not just, giving them send them a brief or a hearing and expect answers. You need to actually try to listen to them where they actually are.
Yes, Helena.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that, because another thing that we've seen when we've been working in our rural municipalities, it's that a lot of the youth that we meet don't feel like their voice matters. So even if the decision makers would be listened, we do have a problem to see the issue. So even if the youth feel like their voice doesn't matter, it doesn't really. We have a bigger problem. So what we have identified and been working with in our project is that before the decision makers and the youth meet, we always have more youth than decision makers. It's very important. Then we always empower the youth before. We give them the tools and the knowledge on beforehand, and then we do the same thing with the decision makers. We depower them before we have these co-creation. I see you laughing. I think this is,
yes.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's funny. I think it's actually very important, because we need to teach the decision makers to learn how to listen and to leave space for youth. And we really need to do that we need to do that before, to empower and depower beforehand.
Torun, you must count as a decision maker as a project manager in Innlandet in Norway. What do you think? What do you think that you and your colleagues think before you make a decision or you make a project? Do you think what will young people think, or do you think what will people in the same age as we are think? What would you say?
It's a complicated question, because there are always the politicians that make the real decisions, and we bureaucrats, we are just making the papers for them so they can take the decisions.
Yes.
But in our county, and I think all the counties in Norway, there are also youth councils. And it's, of course, a big question, are they representative? We all know who were elected to those councils. It was those who were most active, had the most meanings, but perhaps not always the representatives. But in my project, I have to say, we haven't asked young people yet, but we are going to do that, because if we are going to develop the rural districts more, we have to ask everybody.
Absolutely. Bára, Strandir, that's a very rural place in Iceland. Were you working for the municipality of Strandir? How are your views on this matter? Are young people involved in the decision making there, or?
There are very few young people there in general.
Yeah.
I think that we just need active citizenship on all levels of society, not only for young people, but for people of all ages. And I think that is maybe sometimes easier in these rural places because there are less people and we usually know each other a little bit better. But that can also create a lot of clashes when you know people very well. But I think that is important that also politics are not for everyone, and youth councils are not for every young person. These are for people like us, and we are sitting here today, but there are so many other people that will never sit on a stage like this, like us here today. But we know that these issues that we're talking about, climate change, sustainability, these are like the biggest problems that we have today, and if you don't solve this, then there is no future. So we need everyone on board, of all ages, of all backgrounds, whether they're into politics or not. And politics in the traditional sense are very scary, but everything we do is political.
We've also been talking about sustainable societies in general here. Strandir is probably one of the most vulnerable society or place in Iceland in terms of rural development. Like you mentioned earlier, there was an issue with the school in Strandir itself. Now it's Hólmavík, but how would you describe the general feeling about sustainable societies in a rural setting in Iceland? Like just taking your example from Strandir.
Well,
what does the future look like?
Well, first of all, there are 3 municipalities in Strandir, and one of them is the smallest municipality in the entire country, Árneshreppur. I am not from there, but I'm familiar with the situation. But I think one of the hardest things is that municipalities that are struggling just to survive, they need the money. That is the main problem, unfortunately. And the solutions that we see for getting more money into these places are usually industries that are not very environmentally friendly, like fish farming and tourism. So yes, it is hard. Well, we need to survive, unless that's not what we want. If we don't want to see future in these rural areas, then that's a conclusion. But if we do, then we need to find some balance between.
And in Sweden, how is the development there? You're also in the rural setting. Maybe some places that are having some difficulties with maintaining, like keeping people there. How does your work try to steer people back into these areas?
Well, we try to focus on where they are, and I talked to some of you at the lunch, and I feel that we kind of need to shift focus from the future to the now, because we see that if the young people, they won't stay in the rural areas and develop vibrant societies if we can't offer them a satisfying now. And I really can't emphasize that enough. Like some of the speakers have talked about if you have a happy childhood, or if you, one of you said that grown-ups, they stay if they are happy. Well, it's the same with the youth. So we really think from our 3 years in these 3 rural municipalities, we've seen that the youth are, they will stay, or as we say, continue to live. We want to make it to feel like it's an active choice to continue to live, not to be, oh, I happen to stay or something. But we see that it's if it's a vibrant society, if they feel like they have, if they like it, they have stuff to do, they have friends or whatever they have, they can make time, they have a meaningful spare time, then it will increase for them to continue to live.
There's interest in a more democratic society in terms of the youth and in terms of what young people get to decide. Radical voices want to make children just be able to simply vote. Maybe, I don't know at what age, 7, 10, maybe make the parents help them at first and then start voting. What would you think about that, Hans-Peter?
I probably don't think that's...
Because you acknowledge that we have certain issues with the current democratic system. That
yes, we have. We certainly do, but I don't think that voting age is the solution. I think that Helena mentioned co-creation before, and I think that we need to, because we're talking sustainability, right? And that is nothing that one group will fix. The youth won't fix it, the old ones won't fix it, and I won't fix it. You know, middle-aged men, white ones. So we need to work together, and I think that is the solution. It might also be a solution of democratic problem, the democratic deficit, because we don't talk politics or democracy on a level that is commonly shared between young people, old people, and idiots like myself. So we actually need to do that. We need to start to do it now, because, as you said, this is not something that we can talk about in the future. The crisis of, especially climate crisis, but now we have so much else to deal with as well since last week. But we need to start doing this yesterday. Right?
Yes, totally.
can I go back to the climate crisis?
Yes.
Because in Norway we have a survey that's called Young Opinion. And it's really concerning because the rate of the young people that really means that climate change is something to engage. It's now only 31%, and it was 47%. And some researchers from Trondheim, I think, they looked into it, and they found that the school strikes didn't lead to any changes, and therefore the engagement went much lower than before. But the percentage of young people being concerned about the climate change, that's the same. And it really is concerning.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose maybe part of it can be just youth in itself wanting to be engaged in a just cause, and then they can find some other causes to be engaged in, or in like he said, these are very complicated times in a broad sense. Do you think that, do you guys have an input in why young people may be moving away from climate as the big issue of our time?
I believe a lot of it has to do with COVID as well. We saw that during COVID, like the thing that went from that overtook climate policy as like the main thing that youth were thinking about was mental health. So I think that it shows that our like primary needs come above climate, and we often have a tendency to deprioritize climate. It maybe doesn't seem as vital or as immediate, and that often, like we talked about earlier as well, like if it comes to putting food on the table or climate, then putting food on the table comes first. But at some point we have to actually put climate above many of the other needs we have.
Mm.
I think it's also just really scary. It is really scary to work with this, and it's also really hard because it's hard to get people to listen. So it is very tiring, it's very scary and very draining. So maybe the people that were involved just burn out and are not active anymore.
And are there any ways to, as you say, to reconcile? Maybe you want a rural society in northwest of Iceland to thrive, but you're at the same time an activist for climate, so suddenly when the solution to make the rural society survive becomes more virkjanir, more just to activate waterfalls or to do something that's not going to help climate. Like, how do you reconcile that? Can you at all?
I do not know.
No.
For a while I thought that tourism was the answer, because then we want to conserve the nature too, because that's the attraction. But tourism is not a sustainable option either. But maybe some sort of balance there in between. But I do not know. I don't have the answer.
No. I guess maybe in other Nordic countries you guys have more debates on what type of energy source to use than we in Iceland do. We have geothermal energy, and then we have the water and such energy. So we really don't discuss it that much. But how's the situation in Sweden? What do politicians fight about there? It's nuclear, more nuclear. Or?
Well, it's complicated.
Yes.
But we have started, building and starting projects for wind and for sun and also for nuclear now. But the thing is, we talk about energy production a lot, all the time actually, but energy consumption is not that much debated, and still 80% of the world of energy consumption is fossil, right? So if we can reduce energy consumption to an extent, that would help a lot, because that would make fossil-free and renewables cheaper, and that would compete better with fossils. So I think the debate is a bit skewed, but there are a few elephants in the room that needs to be actually both visible and debated on. And one is that Norway gave out 50 new options for oil prospecting this year only. And we're sitting here talking about sustainability. that, at least my mind, is blown away by that. I'm not sure what to say more than okay,
Yes.
for you. But
Are you jealous?
Energy-wise, we need to go away from fossil as soon as possible. And I think in Sweden we will double the need in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, and we're on our way to starting producing it. But consumption is just as important as production. Bitcoin mining in the world is actually consuming just as much as Sweden as a country per year. Okay?
Yes, that's food for thought. And Norwegians, how do you respond to the allegations? No, to the obvious truth. Then.
I can start with saying I am ashamed of this new oil. I don't remember the names, but you know. We are discussing wind, and it's a large discussion. We are discussing solar. That's not so conflicty, but yes, it's complicated.
Yes, how do young people in Norway view the oil industry?
I think it's very split because many people have parents working in the oil industry as well, of course. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, like, if you have to choose between having a job and being sustainable, that's a kind of difficult decision to make. But also many people are saying, like, oh, Norwegian oil is the greenest in the world, and if we wouldn't be doing it, someone else would. So there are a lot of different. I mean, it's a hot topic of discussion.
Yeah.
That way. So there are many differing opinions, but I believe that youth, as in general, have like a more negative view to petroleum in general.
Yeah, Helena, how do you think young people in Sweden want to have things? What energy source do they want to have, and do they think that the solution to the problem is, as he says, maybe more reducing the consumption or fixing the production side?
This is actually not a question that have come up with the youth that we've met. So, to be sincere to what I believe in, you have to ask the youth themselves, and yes. I don't know. No,
they haven't answered yet. Yes, there are various sustainability issues facing the Nordic countries. I mentioned here earlier the drop in fertility that we have in all Europe, and that must be a way of must be a part of this sustainability issue. Like how is this discussed a lot in, for example, Sweden? If we start with that, or are they being like, yeah? How is the discussion around that issue?
It's done.
Do young people feel it's a feasible way to live life? Do you think it's feasible to start a family and start living life, or?
Well, I'm not sure actually. I think it differs mainly because of where you live and what surroundings you are in and the possibilities you have there. But I think that the problem with not enough children is really something that we should be discussing much more. Somebody here said today that they learned that go look for the kindergartens. Because where there are kindergartens full of children, there will be a future. And I totally agree. We are not addressing this problem. And, most of the democratic countries in the world are facing the same problem. They are actually losing people in a short while. And that might actually be the ruin of democracy as we know it, probably.
Yes, that's not a very nice prospect. How is it? Maybe start with you, Helena. Sweden, are people your age, our age, are they thinking of, like, are they frustrated? Do they think I would like to start, but my situation doesn't permit it, or how is it?
I think it depends on who you ask, because youth are the same as we adults aren't a homogeneous group to be like, I think this or that. But the youth that we've talked to, I have to circle back to if they have a satisfying now, wherever they are, if they are in a big city or in a rural area where we do work and where we work to have a vibrant society, if they are thriving, if they are having, if they like it there, then they are more likable to stay there to start a family. But then you also have to have good health care and such as. So it is questions that are discussed, especially for those who already moved away and going to move back. And we haven't really met as many as I would have wanted to have numbers for that, but those we have talked to, they certainly address this as, if I'm going to move back, because now I find a partner maybe, so maybe now I do want to move back and have to help my rural municipality to thrive, but there isn't any place to even give birth or such. So it is definitely a...
So you feel the government or the authorities don't do enough to incentivize it, or do you feel that authorities don't do enough to incentivize that, or
well, it's certainly it's a lot about money as well. But I really think that if we do these co-creations, that the young people are they set the agenda, not that the adults bring in the youth when they want to have the youth to say about something. If the youth are included early on in the process, we will have discussed these issues within the local municipalities as well.
Yeah.
Just one comment on that. I think you're totally right. And I think that there are small practical problems that needs to be solved in order to actually be able to address the problem at all. And I should take just one example. Where I live, there is a 5-hour drive to where you can give birth. So mothers need to go 5, maybe 5.5 hours in a car to give birth. And there are many young, maybe mothers that will not have that. They will stay in the city area because they have a 20-minute drive to give birth. So that's just a small, because you don't see the big picture, you don't look at it on a systemic level. We need to do that much more than today.
Yes, we have the same situation in Iceland in some places, but in Norway, how is it?
Yes, of course, in Norway also. But I don't think that's the main problem, because you see the same fertility rate in the cities, even lower some places. And I think this is a generational difference, because we have, of course, children 3 and 4, and I look at my own children. I'm starting to get grandchildren now, but they wait until they have turned 30 years old, because at first you can have an education, you're traveling, then you will have a job, then you will have enough money to buy a house, and you will get a new job, and perhaps have a child, and then you have turned 30 or 35. And you can't have more than 1 and 2 children, perhaps 3 if you, if you want to. But it's a big difference when you start getting your children. And that's perhaps a difference between those who have the vocational education, because they have finished when they are 20. But when you study, you are perhaps 25 or 27. So the more people who are studying and exploring the world, the later you will have your child.
So we have to shut down the universities. How do people in Norway, your age, when do they plan on having children?
I mean, after education, of course.
Yeah.
So I think that is mainly, like, that's an issue on the level of society as a whole. I mean, what before you could get a job with a high school diploma, now you need a master's degree. So, like, if every job needs to have, like, such a high degree of education to get started, then people have to get a longer education, and more people are getting children later. So I think that's a problem on, like, society as a whole.
Bára, when you're thinking about solving, for example, the issue of strandir, do you think it would be better if people were having more children there, or do you think much greater solution is needed? And also in Iceland, how do you perceive the issue of people postponing the fertility issue?
Well, it's a very big question. Well, in Strandir, I think that there is, like, just in general, a lack of young people. So people usually move back when they want to have kids because it is, in general, a nice place to raise kids. It's a smaller community, it's safer. But right now, the community is struggling a lot, and we are struggling to provide proper services for especially families with children. But I think the housing crisis, like the price of housing is really high, especially for young people starting to buy houses. So adding a kid to that equation is I think, very unrealistic for a lot of people. I think also that it is hard for, if I talk about this on a larger scale, of governments and people in power complaining about lower fertility and decline in population when they are anti-immigration and anti-refugees. I think that's quite hypocritical, to be honest. So to be hostile to people who are willing to come into these places and work, and then, you know, when the society as a whole is not.
Like such issues are very debated in Sweden, for example. Like, how is the debate on that tension between, like, if we need more people, do we take more immigrants, or do we try to incentivize births? Like,
I think you know the answer to that, but because we have now been adjusting the Swedish immigration policies to the EU level mostly, which is something that has been done in the past year, but there is a mismatch because, as Bara said, we need people to work, right? We have been talking about this earlier today as well. We need to attract people. The Nordfjord Academy was really astonishing. But what if everybody did a Nordfjord Academy? Who would we attract? We would be fighting for the same people, right? So we need probably more immigrants, we need, at least in Sweden, we need more immigrants to take part in the labor market, and the ones who come needs to be put to work, of course, and I think we should have more of them because we need people. But we also need to make society work as a whole, with lots and lots of things to be done when it comes to integration and stuff, but we need to be able to participate because to be meaningful if you're young, if you're old, if you're an immigrant, or if you're not, you need to be bringing your bit to the table. And if we don't allow people to do that, whether they are young people or whether they are immigrants or whether they are older people, which are maybe the three parties that are being most discriminated on in Sweden, we will have a problem. We will have a problem with budget. We will have a problem with labor force. We will have a problem with lots of things, security not least. So I think policies on that in that area might be up for discussion.
Yes.
In the future.
Like in these rural communities, which all of you kind of represent in some sense, like here in Iceland, we have a very grave and complicated situation with farmers. I think we've gone from maybe in 100 years or something for 40% of the nation being farmers, or to maybe 3% or something. Like the industry has so radically changed that you know, you're still stuck in the same discussion of like how much subsidies do we give them? How, instead of like reimagining the whole system, that is also a question of sustainability. The food production, for example, farmers in your zone, like, are they able to live from it, or is it just like a side thing with some tourism now, or?
Yeah, I think most farmers I know from my home region have 2 other jobs at least. So
Yes.
No, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and what do they think? Like, do they think we just need more, like a 5% more, or do they think like this thing that we've always done has collapsed?
I don't know what they think.
No.
In my opinion, I think we should move towards non-animal based
Yes,
food.
more vegetables.
Yes, more vegetables and grain as well.
Yes, but do you think Icelandic authorities are interested in doing that, or is it?
It doesn't seem like it.
No. How is the issue in Norway? What do young people want to see in agriculture? Is it do they realize where their food comes from?
I don't know enough about the agricultural sector to really give that question the answer it deserves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
We were discussing. Yeah. What's your view?
I can say a bit about agriculture and food security. I think we have to change our mindset. Every farmer has a choice. They can stop farming when they want to and work with other things. We can't stop eat food.
Yeah.
So it's our society that have to maintain the food production. Either it's vegetables or meat or milk or eggs or all the things we eat. So
And how are farmers in Norway doing, would you say?
it's the same as in Iceland.
Yes.
The rate is going rapidly down. You have to have larger and larger farms to live only of that. It's a saying in Norway. Before, the farmer used to have to marry a teacher to get the economy to go around. Now you need at least 2 teachers.
Yes. 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 And do you think it's just going to get worse, or just do you think it's just going to be 3 teachers and 4 teachers and 5 teachers? Is it just getting worse, or do you see any hope in the industry, if you call it an industry?
I'm not sure, because at the same time that we are saying, the politicians in Norway are saying that we have to strengthen the agriculture production, we allow the import of food from other countries, and perhaps there are too much meat, they will freeze it down and still make import, and vegetables, we throw away those that don't look nice. How's that for a policy? I can't understand it at all.
It's not very sustainable.
No,
maybe.
not sustainable at all.
Hans-Peter, you were talking about the democratic deficit, and she's talking about the politicians who say one thing and then the world is burning in front of everyone and they just keep saying that everything is fine. How is it in Sweden? Are you guys sustainable in terms of food?
I'm quite sure we're not, but it's actually becoming a bit better, because Norway's losing farmers and Iceland has been losing farmers. We did that long ago. We already lost them, you know. So I think that people are actually waking up, because we cannot feed the country in a crisis. We have about 50% self-sustainable rate of food in Sweden. So I think we're actually going in the right direction. People are trying to find ways to enhance production.
You're from a liberal party. Are they moving back to a sort of protectionism?
No, I don't think so. I think people are getting wiser. I think they're buying more Swedish stuff. I think they're, not buying Argentinian grain-fed beef anymore in the same volumes they used to. It's a matter of money, of course, but we are a bit stupid being rational in this. We think we're rational when we buy the cheapest stuff. We're really not. We're not paying enough. That's the big problem. And I think the same applies maybe to Iceland and Norway. But we see a tendency actually locally where I live that people are accepting to pay a bit more for locally produce and better stuff. And that will be a part of a larger Swedish production as well, I think. Finland is really good at this, but we don't have any Finns here on the panel.
Yes, Torun?
Only a comment. In Norway, we have been using approximately 10% of our income on food. I was in Romania in 2012. They used over 60% of their income on food.
Yeah.
So we don't appreciate the food at all.
No, no, yeah. If young people were to decide completely, they would probably many of them they choose as Bára described, more vegetables and such. Do you think that that would be the reality in Sweden if young people could choose?
I wouldn't say that agriculture is my area of expertise either, so I will have to.
Yeah, you say the same thing. Well, some more issues that you are concerned with, guys, in the youth area. Do you feel like, because since we have this platform, do you feel like there are some urgent issues that grown-ups don't address? Is it just the youth participation, or are there any particular issues that come to mind?
Well, I believe that to solve pretty much everything, we have to to bridge the gap between youth and politicians, because that involves everything, you know. So if we do, like in our project Youth Up North, where we have hired a youth coordinator for 3 years in each municipality, we've seen that they become that bridge between the youth and the decision makers. And also we've been having local steering groups with real mandate. We had the kommunalråd, what is mayor? Pretty much the mayor. You know, we have like the real power in the room as well as the youth coordinator. So we've seen that to really give the youth more real power will solve everything.
Yeah, that's the idea. But like, have you felt that they can really impact something? Yeah, like that's a question. Have you felt that the youth participating in these programs, have you felt they can really impact?
Yes, definitely. In all 3 of the municipalities, we have started youth clubs. We have youth councils as well, because the youth wanted it. We have done, I think, around roughly 500 activities from the youth themselves initiatives that has been different in all the municipalities. So we don't have like really, you should do this, then this will happen, because you have to ask the youth, and what they want will be different in all the municipalities and in all our countries as well.
Mm-hmm. From you guys, any thoughts on this? Like some final words on yes, the urgency of really listening to young people. Also in these discussions we're having in either fertility or environmental or food sustainability issues. Like what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the common denominator with a lot of sustainability issues and a lot of these questions is that we need to move away from the concept of infinite growth. Capitalism, essentially.
Yes.
I think that's a great closing line for me, at least.
Move away from capitalism, and you?
I think our level of consumerism is one of the main issues, and kind of the same thing, essentially. I mean, with the pollution and microplastics and global warming due to our levels of production threaten the future of this planet, and then therefore we need to have products that are built to last and be able to be fixed by the end user. And I also think that's a very important point for where policy can actually come into the picture, where you can mandate, for instance, like the right to repair movement we're seeing in the European Union, so that consumers will have the ability to actually fix their own products, and also like being taught electronics repair and sewing and stuff in school. I think that is an important part of lowering our consumerism.
Any final words from you guys? Thoughts?
Yes, I hope that more young people will engage in the politics, and that's really an important question, because half of the politicians under 30 years quit before this last election in Norway, and that's scary.
They don't want to be in politics.
Yes, they quit the politics because of mobbing and personal attacks for many of them.
They don't have what it takes. And Hans-Peter?
Well, there are many...
You didn't quit politics, you stayed, or when did you start? Or
No, I was a late bloomer, so I'm not very old in politics, but I'm not here in that role actually. But even though I think that we need to, as I said earlier, we need to somehow create an arena where all these groups can work together in a much better way than we are now. And I think that lowering the voting age is not the answer to that, because there are things that motivate a certain age for voting and for driving and for drinking. But we need to, how should I put it? We need to take responsibility in a totally other way than we're actually doing right now, for the macro level as well as the micro level. Mm-hmm. Because on a macro level it might look good, you know, nuts won. But on the third level, not so much. So we need to actually be more systemic. If we change something over here might go wrong or be better. But we need to actually know that. And we need to be aware of that when we co-create. I think that's a very good word. Thank you for that.
Okay, yeah, I guess co-creation, yes, that's the final keyword here for this panel today. Thank you all very much for joining. To the audience and to the online audience as well, thank you very much for being with us here in Iðnó today, this historical Icelandic building. You guys are heading off to workshops, starting in half an hour, most of them, I suppose. Now we have a coffee break from 14:30 to 15, and there will be individuals who will guide the certain groups to their places. So the thematic groups will find some way to assemble and find their place. Otherwise, thank you very much for being with us today, and enjoy the day going forward.